In a prior video, I first showed you the footage where my client's wife had filmed police arresting him in the front yard of their house. This was following a domestic call. When the cops arrived, boom, it went straight pretty much into a use of force against my client. The latter, basically half of that, ended up being filmed by my client's wife. So fast forward to the federal lawsuit being filed, and I'll link the original video here in the description so you can review that first. Now you get to see, this just happened last week where I took the depositions of the police officers who were involved in that incident, got to put them under oath and ask them questions. So here's something really you rarely get to see, and I'm curious, I cut it up a little bit. This will have to be part one because it's long. I'm curious to see what you think. So you saw the video, and you can actually read the lawsuit allegations. Now you actually get to see the evidence. Take a look. Really curious to know what you think.
This is the video deposition of Joshua Bish being taken by the plaintiff, Civil Action 121 CV 615, captioned Melvin Sargent v. Joshua Bish et al., U.S. District Court for the Southern District of West Virginia at Bluefield.
Do you remember why you were initially called to this scene?
I was advised by Mercer 911 that there was a ongoing domestic between Melvin Sargent and another female, where Melvin Sargent had apparently was arguing and physical and was trying to kick down a door.
And do you remember who had called 911?
Off the top of my head, no.
Did you know at the time?
No. All we received was the name of the individual that was possibly causing the problems. And
had you ever been to that location before?
no, I have not.
Were you familiar with that location at all?
No.
Did you know who lived there?
No.
As of that moment, did you know who Melvin Sargent was?
No.
Okay. When you pulled up to the scene on November 28th, tell me about it. What did you see upon your initial arrival?
When I pulled in, I observed the female a few car lengths away, walking away, and observed Mr. Sargent, the male individual that was described to be Melvin Sargent, walking from the road in the yard, going towards the basement door of the residence. At that point, I observed the male. He was kind of walking with his fist clenched, kind of looked irritated, and the female was obviously upset, crying. And because more hadn't been certified and what hadn't dealt with any, I didn't feel comfortable with her approaching anybody that may have been aggressive of any way. I told her to go talk to the female, and I went to go talk to Mr. Sargent. It was one of those real quick, hey, you go talk to her, I'm gonna go talk to him.
Let me refer you to your police report. Again, you wrote that report, right?
Correct.
You were aware of the fact that you needed to include all important details in your report.
Correct.
Okay. And do you believe that you did that?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay. You wrote that Deputy Adair later advised you that Mr. Sargent and her were talking about Mr. Sargent's deceased mother, at which point her mother came into the room that they were in and rolled her eyes about the conversation, which aggravated Mr. Sargent, causing them to argue. She advised prior to law enforcement arrival there was no violence and nothing is wrong.
Yes.
Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
Now, you told me you didn't know who the 911 caller was.
Correct.
Did you ever talk to the 911 caller before arresting Melvin Sargent that day?
No.
Did you ever even find out the name of the 911 caller prior to arresting Melvin Sargent?
I think I remember asking them, but I don't ask them, daring them to get all the information, but that was about it.
But you never talked to the 911 caller?
No, I did not.
Did you talk to Jolena Chavez prior to arresting Melvin Sargent?
Prior to arresting, no.
But prior to arresting him, you had not talked to any witnesses, correct?
No, correct.
Prior to arresting him, you hadn't even talked to the plaintiff about what had happened or what had not happened?
Correct.
Now, what about Melvin Sargent? Did you know who he was?
I just gathered from the description 911 gave and his mannerism, how he was walking, and he was obviously upset and irritated. And I wanted to talk to him first, considering he was because how he was walking and carrying himself, felt he was more of possibly the possible suspect that 911 had described, and figured go ahead and talk to him before he gets too far away and I have to run.
So where was he located physically when you first saw him?
Whenever I first pulled in, he was to my 3 o'clock in the driveway, maybe from here to the second pew.
So he was located in the driveway to this residence?
Correct. And walking away from me towards the basement door.
And did you say anything to him initially?
I did. I asked him, hey, stop right there for a minute.
Did he say anything to you?
No, he acted like he didn't hear me, which I gave benefit of the doubt that just pulled in. A woman down the street was screaming pretty loud and crying, and my car was running. So I went around to the front of the car, kind of faster pace. Hey, bud, stop right there. And he complied.
Did you, upon your arrival, did you personally observe any crime being committed by anybody?
Upon my arrival, no.
It didn't appear to you that Melvin Sargent was threatening her in any way, did it?
I didn't see any type of threats at that point. No, he was walking away from her.
You didn't see any domestic violence, anything like that?
No.
Did you know at the time who lived at that house?
No, I did not.
Did you assume that these two individuals lived at that house?
I'd have imagined that they was the ones that was living there.
Did you identify yourself to him?
Yes.
What'd you say?
Like I did with any time I approached anybody, I'm Deputy Bish with the Sheriff's Department.
And did you tell him why you were there?
I was getting ready to, hey, I need you to stop right there. He stopped, and I said, before I'm here over some type of fight or something, I don't know what else is going on, but before we go any farther, I need to pat you down and make sure there's no weapons or anything that can hurt me or you.
All right, so at the time this interaction took place, you're both standing in the driveway.
Correct, close to the basement door.
And you had not at that point talked to Juliana Chavez?
Correct.
You had no idea what she had to say?
Correct.
You had not observed any crime being committed as of yet, had you?
Correct.
In fact, you didn't have probable cause at that point to believe that any crime had been committed?
I had
Take to the form.
Sorry.
You can answer.
I had reasonable suspicion that there was something that had happened.
You got a domestic call?
Yes.
You had reasonable suspicion to show up to that call?
Yes.
Now, you know what probable cause is?
Correct.
You would agree with me that at the point you first encountered Melvin Sargent, you didn't yet have any probable cause to believe that he had committed a crime?
Correct. All I had was reasonable.
So when you first encountered him, he wasn't under arrest at that point?
No.
Was he a suspect?
No. He was an individual in the scene of the call that would fit the description of what was described.
So he wasn't even a suspect of any particular crime at that point?
Correct.
When this first initial encounter between you and Mr. Sargent took place, did he attempt to flee or evade you?
No.
So when you told him to stop, he stopped?
After the second time. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt because of the circumstances.
And then what happened?
He turned around, looked at me, told him, hey, my name's Deputy Bish, Sheriff's Department. You just stop. We're here over some type of fight. And prior we go any further, I'm going to make sure you don't have any weapons or anything that can hurt me or you, so we can figure out what's going on. He ended up putting his left hand kind of towards me, like this, and he started to move his right hand behind his back.
And at this point, you don't have an arrest warrant, right?
No.
You don't have a search warrant for the residence?
No.
So did Melvin turn around and face you?
He did.
You asked Melvin at that time for ID?
No.
Did you ask him what his name was?
No. My main goal at first is to make the scene safe.
Did you have any indications that this scene was not safe?
From how he was walking and his nature of how he was looking, felt that there may be something to it.
And you said that was the fact that he had clenched fists?
Clenched fists, how he was walking, and just his overall mannerisms. And
How would you describe this walk?
Tense, like his muscles was tensed.
Were you wearing a body cam?
No, I was not.
And did Melvin say anything to you at this point?
No.
So at that point, were you detaining Melvin?
At that point, I was approaching him to conduct the safety check to ensure the scene was safe and beginning to ask my questions for why are we here.
Well, I mean, was he free to leave and go in the house at that point?
At that point, no.
So you were conducting a safety check and he was being detained, had to comply with that safety check?
Yes.
Did you ever ask Melvin Sargent or any other homeowner or any other resident at that time, or someone you thought was a resident, for permission to be on the property?
No.
I assume nobody gave you permission to be on the property.
Nobody told me I couldn't.
Did Melvin give you any indications that he didn't want you on the property?
No?
You wrote in your report that at first, Melvin began to comply.
Yes.
You told him to stop and he stopped.
Yes, he stopped, turned around, faced me, put his left hand up and started reaching behind his back with his right.
Didn't you ask him to put his hands on his head?
No.
You didn't?
No, I asked him to stop right there and I'm just going to pat you down real fast.
You didn't write in your report that you asked Melvin to put his hands on top of his head?
No.
All right, I asked you if you asked Melvin Sargent to put his hands on top of his head, and your recollection is that you had not.
No.
But reviewing the report that you wrote after this incident, your report indicates that you did.
Yes.
Which is it?
It would be what's on the report.
All right, you wrote in your report, as I approached, I observed Mr. Sargent had his right hand in his right front pocket and his left hand on his side.
Yes.
I told Mr. Sargent to place his hands on top of his head, that I was going to conduct a safety check to ensure he did not have any weapons.
Correct.
When you asked Mr. Sargent to put his hands on top of his head, what did he do?
He put his left hand out in front of him and started to reach behind his back with his right.
And you didn't know who he was, right?
No.
All right, so then what did you do?
When his hand went up, and then I seen his right hand going behind his back, with my left hand, I reached around on his wrist to do a come-along hold with a simple wrist maneuver to gain compliance because I didn't know what he was reaching for, and I'm not taking any type of chances to risk myself or himself or anybody else's safety.
And why specifically his right hand? Why'd you grab his right hand?
All right, I grabbed his left, I'm sorry, as he was facing me.
All right, well, you wrote in your report that you grabbed his right hand. All right, I believe if you look at third paragraph, you say, I told Mr. Sargent to place his hands on top of his head, that I was going to conduct a safety check to ensure he did not have any weapons. At this point, Mr. Sargent began to comply, at which point I stepped towards him and began to reach for his right hand, at which point he started to step away.
Yes.
All right, so initially you went to reach for his right hand.
Yes, that was the one that was moving, but it was on his opposite side, and his left hand was right there in front of me.
All right, why did you begin to reach initially for his right hand?
I didn't know what he was reaching for.
Okay, it wasn't because you were going to handcuff him?
No.
Because he wasn't under arrest at that time?
No. At that point, if we could play a whole what-if game all day with it, but if he would have just let me pat him down and found out nothing would have been wrong, we'd have been on our way.
He hadn't threatened you?
No.
He hadn't attempted to strike you?
No.
So what happened next?
When I was able to grab his wrist, he attempted to pull away very aggressively, and considering he was still trying to reach behind his back and then complying with me from telling him to stop, I ended up striking him with a closed fist to the right cheek, or left cheek, I'm sorry. I ended up striking him in the left side of his cheek. We began to spin around and wrestle around a bit till my back was to the house, and he ended up getting pressed up against a car door, a car that was in the driveway. I was able to get him spun around. At this point, Deputy Moore had came down, assisted with the wrestling match for a moment, and we both observed that there was a firearm in the small of his back. Deputy Moore secured that, was able to pull that weapon out and went to go secure it, at which point I was able to manipulate his arm a little bit more to where I was able to put him onto the ground. He ended up rolling onto his back, and we continued to wrestle. At that point, in my eyes, he was under arrest, and it was pretty much just a big old wrestling match until Deputy Moore got back after securing the weapon somewhere, and we was able to get him rolled over on his stomach and handcuffed.
Right, but you didn't have any information or indication that he was armed at that point?
I didn't know.
Because you hadn't seen the gun yet?
Correct.
Okay, so you're just treating him like anyone you're encountering, they theoretically could be armed?
Yes, anybody can be armed with anything, and my goal is I want them and me to go home at the end of the day.
But nobody had told you that he was armed?
Correct.
And he hadn't told you that he was armed?
No.
You hadn't seen a gun?
No.
So you hadn't run his criminal history or anything like that?
No.
So at this point,
We're still in the driveway, but because we're moving, it's the doors. I'm not sure where the basement door was.
He doesn't want to have this interaction with you.
Correct.
So was he under arrest at that point?
At that point, as soon as he refused to allow for a safety pat down, he was under arrest for the obstructing.
So did you ever go to the ground with him?
After the firearm was secured, me and Melvin ended up going to the ground, continued to wrestle. When Moore got back down there, he kicked her in the chest, after which point I again struck him with a closed fist, trying to gain compliance, and eventually we was able to get him rolled over and handcuffed.
Melvin Sargent had never grabbed a gun.
No, he never actually touched it.
And what happened after you punched him in the face?
He lost balance a little bit, and that's when I was able to maneuver to where I was facing his back to get him.
All right, what happened after you got him to the ground?
We wrestled, trying to get him to roll over using empty hand control, wrist manipulation to get him to roll over.
Did you strike him again?
I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I did, but I don't technically remember.
Now, Melvin alleges that at some point during this time period that you stomped his hand or his wrist. Do you deny that?
Yeah, I never stomped anything.
Do you have any idea what could have injured his wrist or his hand during this encounter?
During this encounter, nothing. It could have been from before we got there, him hitting something, or that's something happened at the jail.
But you did punch him in the face?
Yes.
You never were aware of any injury to Melvin's wrist?
No.
Now, when you punched Melvin, were you wearing gloves?
I was.
Tell me about your gloves.
They're a cloth mixed with a type of UFC type knuckle covering to protect my knuckles and anything I come in contact with.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as exhibit number 5 for this deposition.
Yes.
Now, I'll represent to you that that is a screenshot that I took out of the video that we have in this case. Does that screenshot accurately represent your hand and your glove on the date of this incident?
It does.
I'll also show you what's been marked as exhibit number 6. I know this isn't the greatest quality, but that is a close-up of your glove, also from the same video.
It is.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
It's your testimony that these gloves, they have reinforced knuckles.
I wouldn't say they're reinforced. You know the UFC type gloves that have like a little padding? That's all it is. It's a thing, it's just, I broke my hand a few times, so I wear it so I don't do it again. And
You broke your hand a few times punching people
yes, it was in a fight.
while you were working as a police officer?
Yes.
Okay, so as a result of that, you bought these gloves?
Yes,
They have extra material at the knuckles.
they do. It's a padding type thing.
So that's to protect your knuckles when you're punching people.
It protects my knuckles, and if I make contact with another individual, it protects them from any type of like knuckle cut or anything.
So you're saying that when you punch somebody with that, it's actually going to feel better to them because you have that glove?
It should, yeah. Feels just like one of the UFC gloves, like little makeshift boxing gloves you wear when you're sparring.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the UFC gloves,
Yes.
and those are not UFC gloves.
No, they're not UFC, but that's what the padding feels like.
I mean, they'd have some problems in UFC if they use those gloves.
Okay. I'm just saying the gloves are that's what the padding feels like.
Do you still have the gloves?
I do not.
Why not?
When they got blood on them, I threw them away. I don't take anything that gets blood on back home to my house.
Did you buy another pair?
I did.
Do you still have it?
Those ones, no.
Now, those were not issue gloves.
Correct.
So that was just your private purchase.
Yes.
Did you get any sort of authorization from your employer to buy or wear those gloves?
I got them from, at the time, when I bought them, Chief Deputy Bailey. I showed them to him. He said they were perfectly fine.
At any point, did your employer instruct you to no longer wear those gloves?
No.
But since you left the Mercer County Sheriff's Office, you've never worn them again?
No, because the policy down there is
Is what?
they don't allow any type of gloves. Other
In
than,
your job now, you don't find the occasion to punch people.
I probably will, but I haven't yet.
You said you threw those gloves away because they had blood on them, right?
Correct.
And that blood was Melvin Sargent's blood.
Not sure.
Well, they didn't have blood. The knuckles of your gloves did not have blood on them already upon your first arrival at Melvin Sargent's house.
No, correct. My mouth was bleeding as well.
All right. Well, you punched Melvin Sargent, you said, in the face.
Yes, in the cheek.
All right, and he was bleeding.
I'm not 100% sure if he was or wasn't. I didn't notice any cuts or...
All right, so you have no idea if that's Melvin Sargent's blood.
Correct.
So you're saying it could be your own blood
It could be.
on your knuckles.
Yes.
You didn't punch yourself, right?
No, I did not.
You punched Melvin Sargent.
Correct.
And it's your testimony here today under oath that you don't know whether or not he was bleeding.
Correct. I'm not 100%, no.
He was treated subsequently for lacerations inside his mouth. You have no idea how that could have occurred.
Inside of his mouth? No, I have no idea.
That's not from you punching him in the face.
It could, I don't know.
You have no explanation for that?
No,
Did you ever see Melvin Sargent punch himself?
no.
Did you ever see him slam his head into your police cruiser or anything like that?
I know he kicked and thrashed around in the backseat of the cruiser quite a bit, but I never seen him physically punch himself.
You're not alleging that he injured himself.
Oh, no.
Whatever side it was,
Yeah.
other than the one punch to Melvin's face that you already testified about, did you ever strike him in the face again during this incident?
Yeah, while he was on the ground wrestling, after he had kicked Deputy Moore, causing her to fall backwards.
Is this before he was handcuffed?
Yes.
Okay, and how many additional times did you strike
Just
Melvin?
the two total, the one initial and the one on the ground. I didn't want to throw any more punches because I was afraid if I would, because where I was on top of him and he was on the ground, his head would have bounced off of the ground or something, caused undue harm. I didn't want to do that.
So to the best of your recollection, it's your testimony that you punched Melvin twice that day.
Yes,
And are you positive that you didn't punch him any more times?
correct.
Were your emotion levels up at this point?
No,
Were you angry?
just fat and out of breath.
Then what'd you do?
We both stood up for maybe 5-10 seconds so we can collect me personally could collect my breath, and like I said, I just got done eating Thanksgiving dinner and I didn't want to throw up on the poor dude. And we collected ourselves and we was able to get him to stand up and walk him up towards my cruiser.
So you guys got him up and you put him in the police car, is that right?
Walked him up to up the driveway and towards on the passenger side of my cruiser.
And then did you put him in the car?
Yeah, I put him in the seat, sat him down. His feet was still outside the cruiser. He refused to put his feet back into the cruiser. I told him multiple times to do it. He complained that his handcuffs was too tight. But prior to that, whenever he was handcuffed, it was with Deputy Moore's handcuffs, and I'd been training her, and I observed her do the pinky tight, which is where you can slide your whole finger inside the cuffs.
Who put the cuffs on?
She did.
All right, it's my understanding from reading your report that you guys put him in the back of the police cruiser and shut the door initially.
No,
No?
not initially, no.
Take a look at the report. Let's see if we can clear this up. Okay, the next sentence you wrote in your report, after closing the passenger rear side door, Mr. Sargent began to kick the inside of my door, causing the door to begin to bow out.
Correct.
All right, that seems to imply to me, or to tell me, that you had closed the passenger rear side door.
When we first got to up there, he refused to get in and ended up having to force him into the vehicle to get his legs all the way in before we could shut it.
The point is you put him in the car and you closed the door.
After I had to force him in, yes.
All right, so you forced him in the rear passenger door and closed the rear passenger door.
Yes.
So he's inside the rear of the police cruiser.
Yes.
The door is closed.
Yes.
He's handcuffed.
Yes.
Behind his back.
Yes.
Then what happened?
I went to the opposite side to where his head was, opened the door, pulled out my OC spray, and advised him if he did not stop trying to kick the door, break the window, he would be pepper sprayed.
So you had the door closed, and then you opened that same door.
Opposite door.
All right. Are you sure it's the opposite door?
Yes, because his head was toward, I wasn't going to go down where he was kicking at.
All right. You wrote in your report, at this point, I opened the same door and began to tell Mr. Sargent to calm down and stop kicking the door, or he would be sprayed with OC.
I'm going to go with that. It's going to be a typo. 'Cause, no,
All right. So you're saying your report is wrong.
on that sentence.
Why would you have written the same door in your report?
Considering this narrative was written quite a few hours later and tired, wanting to go home, rushed it. It is a mistake.
Would it be fair to say that even a few hours after the incident, that your memory about the incident would have been more accurate in 2019 than it is here today in August of 2022?
My recollection, it's still pretty similar to it.
All right, so he's handcuffed behind his back, he's in the rear of the cruiser, he's kicking the inside of the door. You then you say, the driver's side passenger door, right?
Yes.
And then you do what?
Tell him if he doesn't stop, he will be pepper sprayed.
And then what happened?
He says, fucking do it, and started kicking the door again.
And then what happened?
Administered a short 3 to 5 second burst of OC spray.
So you sprayed him with pepper spray for 3 to 5 seconds.
Yes, which is what we were taught.
Did you strike him at all?
No.
So at this point, you still hadn't talked to any witnesses.
No.
You closed him inside the rear of the police cruiser with pepper spray in his eyes.
It was, yes.
Were the windows rolled up?
They was cracked.
Cracked how long? How far?
I'd say enough to where if somebody had free hands, they'd be able to put their fingers through the tops of both.
And did it appear to you that Melvin was suffering from the pepper spray at that point?
He was in pain from it, but it was nothing that I hadn't seen or felt myself before.
But you didn't strike him at all in the rear of the police cruiser?
I did not strike, no.
Did Melvin attempt to strike you?
In the back of the cruiser, no. He attempted to spit.
All right. You didn't write anything in your report about him attempting to spit on you at any point, did you?
No.
But you did write in your report an allegation that Melvin had leaned back and kicked towards you, striking you in the chest.
Yes, this was after, if I'm thinking right, whenever we had to stop because he started to kick the door again as we was traveling.
All right, so you're saying that happened during the transport?
Yes.
Right. I don't think that exactly jives with your report, if you want to take a look at it.
That's what I just see. It looks like I probably just forgot where I was in the narrative when I was typing and posed them on separate sides. Looks like that one goes to the other paragraph.
Reading your report,
yes.
You would agree with me that it says that this encounter took place before you left the scene.
Correct.
Because you described what happened, the allegations that you're trying to get him to calm down and stop kicking the door, and that that he tried to kick you, and that you sprayed him with pepper spray. And then you describe Deputy Adair arrives on the scene with Trooper Rose.
Yes.
So the way you wrote the report, it sounds like this all happened at the scene before you left to transport Mr. Sargent.
Yes.
But you're telling me today that your testimony, that your report is inaccurate. Is that right?
That section, yes.
All right, I'm going to show you what has already been marked as exhibit number 2 for this deposition. Now, that is the criminal complaint that charged Melvin Sargent in this case.
Yes.
And that criminal complaint includes a narrative written by you, correct?
Yes, the same narrative.
And that's the same narrative, the same police report that we've been discussing.
Yes.
You included this same report, written in the same way, to the magistrate, I think it was Magistrate Dorsey, to review.
Yes.
And the magistrate did review this report, and it actually indicates that probable cause was found for the warrantless arrest of Melvin Sargent that day.
Yes.
Okay. And then Melvin Sargent was prosecuted pursuant to this criminal complaint.
Correct.
Okay. Would you agree with me that the report that you submitted to the magistrate as part of this criminal complaint was under oath?
Yes.
Okay. So you're telling me here today that there are these inaccuracies in your report, but you never informed the magistrate that there were inaccuracies in your report, did you?
I didn't notice them.
So you didn't notice the inaccuracies in your report until today, August of 2022?
Yes.
Okay, so he had been charged with 2 counts of battery on an officer, right?
Yes.
And then 1 count of obstruction.
Yes.
Now, I take it the obstruction, I think you already testified, the obstruction was when you initially encountered him and tried to perform that safety check.
Yes.
He didn't initially, or he began to comply, but then pulled away.
Pulled away, yes. And
That was the obstruction.
that's the obstruction.
But you also had him charged, using your report, with 2 counts of battery on an officer.
Correct. Whenever he kicked more and I got hit sometime. I don't know when it was.
Well, you wrote in your report that he had tried to kick you in the chest.
Yes.
But your report says that that happened at the scene.
Yes.
You're telling me now that that happened during transport.
I believe so, yes. That's what's making sense.
All right. I mean, you understand that you're under oath here today.
I do, yes.
All right. I'm not asking you to guess, and I don't want you to guess if you don't remember.
Okay.
Okay. Do you remember whether or not the allegation of Melvin trying to kick you happened before you transported Melvin or during the transport?
That was during the transport.
You're positive.
Yes.
But that's not what's represented in your report.
Correct.
Objection. Asked and answered.
All right, I'll show you what's been marked as exhibit number 3, and that is a court order or a motion form indicating that the 2 charges of battery on an officer were dismissed by the court.
Correct.
Melvin Sargent was not convicted of those allegations or of those charges, was he?
Of the batteries, no.
All right, I'm going to show you the video that we have in this case.
I can see it, John. Stay there. Stay there.
Stop, Bish!
You lost me, motherfucker. Guts out.
What?
Fuck this motherfucker.
Stop hitting them, Bish! Stop hitting them!
Stop it.
Girl.
Stop.
Girl,
Stop it.
I've done it for
Stop.
years.
Okay, I understand that. But he's got it under control. He has got to
You
stop.
don't need to hit him in the face.
Stop it.
To get him under control. I know.
When someone comes
I
to
can call you a bunch of state troopers
That's
if you
fine.
want.
All right, so that was 0 through about 32 seconds of that video.
Correct.
That shows you in the video, right?
Yes.
And you're placing Melvin Sargent in the rear of that police cruiser.
Correct.
You saw and you heard Melvin Sargent asking you to loosen his handcuffs.
Yes.
That section of the video, would you agree with me that it shows you engaging in a use of force against Melvin Sargent?
It does.
Would you also agree with me that that section of footage, 0 through 32 seconds, does not show Melvin Sargent kicking you in the chest?
Correct.
It does not show Melvin striking you in any way?
Correct.
What would you characterize as the nature of the force that you used? What did you do?
The push in, and while he was inside the vehicle, I held his head down with my right hand because he kept trying to come up, trying to spit on me.
Okay. And again, your report mentions nothing about Melvin trying to spit on you.
Correct.
So are you saying that you didn't strike him at all?
I never hit him in the back of the cruiser, no.
What we see in the first 30 seconds of this video, you're saying that no punches were thrown by you.
No, none.
You're just holding him down.
Yes. Hold him down, trying to talk to him, tell him calm down, quit. As soon as we get to the office, we'll figure everything out.
All right. So looking at your report again, the use of force that you did engage in at this point in the first 30 seconds of the video, you didn't mention anything about that in your report.
No.
Melvin Sargent was handcuffed at this time.
Yes.
All right, let's continue to watch the video. We're at 32 seconds. I'm going to play it a little longer.
Bish, quit! Bish, no! Bish, please! Don't!
All right, so I stopped at 55 seconds there. From the 30-second range to the 53-second range, would you agree with me that shows additional uses of force by you against Melvin Sargent?
From forcing him into the vehicle.
You tell me.
Yeah, from forcing him into the vehicle, and that was it. from holding his head down and me getting out and using vocal commands.
All right, did you use physical force on Melvin Sargent at this time?
Define physical force.
All right, let's play it again. For 30 seconds. This time we won't stop it.
Okay.
So that was part one. Well, let's call that part one. And as you can see, I'm dressed like I've been in court, and I have been in jury trial for the past 2 days. So I'm pretty exhausted. This is all I've gone through so far. But you're going to want to see part two, because if I recall correctly, and it was just last week, it gets even better. And the other police officers involved took their depositions as well. So you will want to see part two.